Here in Korea as being the TVP master, but lately I'm starting to kind of feel Clem, man. This guy is just on top of the world in terms of TVP play, and we're already ready to get to game number one, Roddy. Down here in the bottom right, spawning is the red Protoss. We have stats.
Let's go a little deep breath. Top left side of Golden Aura, we are looking at the main base of the man who lived out his childhood dream 6 months ago by lifting that trophy in Atlanta. And obviously he wants to go back to back. Representing Team Liquid, it's Clem.
Such an incredible match, and I'm really curious what kind of gameplay Stats is going to bring to the table in this opening series, because it's surprising to me a little bit how you said all of the Koreans were telling you Stats' PVT especially is good these days, because I think about Stats in his games in the GSL. I'm thinking of him playing PvZ exceptionally well. PvP, he's quite good. Still lost a hero there in the quarterfinals, but PVT has always been a little bit of his weak stage, even after becoming the Shield Divider yet again. So the fact that the Koreans are saying in custom games, Stats is now even bringing his PVT to the level of these other matchups. He's becoming one of the best PVT players in Korea. It kind of makes me feel like we could potentially see Stats make a very deep run in a tournament like DreamHack.
It's possible, but obviously this first best of 3 is incredibly important immediately. Yes, this is the winner stage, and technically these players have 3 series to lose in total because they performed well in these regional tournaments. So we have the upper bracket in the winner stage, but the moment you lose in the upper bracket of the winner stage, you'll never go directly into the quarterfinals anymore. And if you lose twice early on, I mean, then you get dropped into the terrifying knockout bracket. So yes, the Stats can go far, but it would really help if he wins this first best of 3, and he has arguably one of the toughest roles in the tournament. Because I think a lot of people, including the Koreans, including the fans online, look at Clem as a top 3 favorite to win it all. So this is not an easy draw by any stretch of the imagination. I expected this opening of Clem. I think multiple Reapers, multiple Hellions. Stats is a very strong defensive Protoss. He's always been for a long time. Might actually not do that, by the way. Clem might be switching it up a little bit here, as he does have a safe command center that he's hiding. It's just a single Reaper so far, but I was kind of expecting Clem to try to find a little bit of damage early on and take the game from there, as long as he's dictating the pace of the game. Because Stats is probably not going to be like a Max Pax or a Hero or a Nightmare right in the face of Clem immediately.
Yeah, Stats is usually the kind of Protoss player that's going to be playing reactively in a matchup, especially like PVT. If he finds the opportunity to come in with a killing blow, he will go for it, but he is not the kind of player to gamble. He's defensive, he likes to play macro, he likes to just kind of control the game on his side of the map. And Clem is playing into that a little bit. He's going for a double gas opening, CC on the high ground, much faster tech. Actually going to be, I think, 1 or 2 Widow Mines into a Cyclone here.
Yeah, it's a bit of everything.
Coming in from Clem.
The Jack of all trades opening, where you're sure he can still be annoying with the Reaper. He can find some damage with that first medevac, Widow Mine, combination of Marines, Cyclone, and Widow Mine. It feels like these builds, if Stats would randomly build a shield battery in his main base, he's gonna have the time of his life, because then you can almost completely ignore that. Of course, you can't ignore the Widow Mine, but hey, Widow Mine's got nerfed, right, State? They never kill anything anymore. They don't harm any probes, I believe.
Yeah, they're not quite as good as they used to be, and the third gateway coming in from Stats actually quite late. Keep in mind, these Korean Protoss players, they do not play more in the same vein of Max Pax, who would love to go for Gate Blink almost any situation. It's usually a little bit more timid in terms of gateway count, so Clem now coming in here with a full medevac and the Reaper. Gonna try and lay waste on the Reaper wall. Should be able to get that pylon at the very least, and unpower one of the only standing gateways here for Stats.
Yeah, Clem obviously knows that he cannot stick around forever. Misses the pickup there, by the way, on one of these Marines. Something we will not point out against any other Terran on the planet, but Clem is known to play this matchup close to perfection, so these are pickups that normally he can make. But this is kind of where I feel that Clem should already start heading home. There is a shield battery in the natural. It's a bit hidden. I don't think Clem has seen it.
Wait, I think Stats actually got supply block by losing that pylon right there. This Immortal is not getting, or the Observer even, is not getting produced whatsoever, so Really losing a bit of momentum, and now with a Cloak Banshee follow-up and also Siege Tanks here in the cards for Clem, this is going to get dangerous really quickly, I think, Rowdy.
Yep, but this is what makes Clem Clem. Clem does not stick around longer than he's supposed to, and that means that yes, he's going for an opening, and he has applied some pressure, and he's keeping the Protoss on 2 bases, but he doesn't stick around that long that he ends up losing the medevac, the Cyclone, the Mine, a bunch of Marines. No, he knows when to go home, and this is annoying, because now as a Protoss, you're like, my 3rd base is kind of late, I do really want to start finding some damage, as Stats finds his army in the center of the map, kills the medevac, blinks back, but do we have an observer in the right spot?
Wow.
Yes, we do. Very good defense by Stats. This is an incredibly solid play.
Oh, now he can get the Banshee too if he blinks, but I think his attention just focused elsewhere here on this push in the center of the map as Stats really just parrying every single blow that Clem is trying to throw his way. He did take a little bit of damage there in terms of infrastructure, but nothing you can't recover from here from Stats. So he's powering up now, adding in Immortals, taking that 3rd base, but here on Golden Ore, I wonder how heavily Clem is going to want to commit to the push. I think it might just be the 1 or 2 Siege Tanks he's produced and then nothing more. So it's not going to be that rare flavor of a heavy Siege Tank push into the 3rd base coming in from Clem. I think from here, the game might quiet down a little bit as we wait for Stim to come online and for +1 infantry weapons to come online. But I'm liking Stats' position quite a bit.
Yeah, the reason it is slowing down is because Stats just had very good defense. He actually picked up the medevac in this end. He wants to get the Cyclone here as well, lose the Observer, but that still gets something in return. But if Clem finds an opening with his Cloak Banshee, if Stats is not ready for that, doesn't have the Observer, doesn't have the Stalkers there, doesn't have the battery in the right position, then Clem can actually continue to keep on pushing with the Marines and the tanks, and we're looking at a completely different game. So the only reason that Clem was pushed this far back is just because Stats so far has had an answer for pretty much everything that Clem is throwing at him. But we also can't get too carried away, because it's not like Clem has been bleeding out a crazy amount of units. Clem is incredibly good in maintaining and preserving his unit count, as he does find himself in a bit of an awkward spot right now, but even this many Marines and on-siege tanks can put up a bit of a fight against the Blink Stalkers.
And I love how active Stats is being on the map with these Blink Stalkers. He's picking off units like medevacs, like Cyclones, like a couple of Marines here and there, and it's just kind of chip damage against the Terran in the mid-game that can really soften the blow of the push that comes later on, because Clem, he's relying a lot on getting damage done with this push, with the siege tanks, with this upgrade timing of combat shields, infantry weapons, stim pack, all finishing in this moment where the Colossi are only just now coming online, even reinforcing with a boosted medevac here. And Stats, he needs to find damage like this in the middle of the map. You got to get this value here with these Stalkers.
Clem is going to finish what he started, I think, in the beginning of the game, and that's working on that pylon, the Cybercore, the gate. So this is all kind of annoying for Stats. Incredibly important to rebuild your Cybercore, because you don't want to be making Zealots for the rest of the game. You're going to need a few more Stalkers eventually. Look at Stats, by the way, casually warping in a 4th Nexus. It's like, alright, my army is strong enough that I don't think you can run into me. I also don't really want to run into you way far away from my batteries and being forced to soak up these Widowmine shots. So he's like, alright, you take those buildings, I'm just going to go ahead and focus on my macro. Because he does lose a few more probes. And I gotta say, the work account of Stats, I don't think is quite what it's supposed to be. You would love to see a Protoss be a few more workers ahead than what he is.
Yeah, considering how well Stats held on in the early game against the aggression from Clem, these Banshees have been able to just chip away at the worker count repeatedly over the past few minutes, really keeping the Protoss economy in check. But despite all of this, I think Stats is still in a pretty good spot. He hasn't really had any trades go too unfavorably for him up until this point. He's adding in a second forge now in addition to that 4th base. Clem only just now throwing down the Ghost Academy, and this is the kind of stage in the game here for Protoss where you add in some sentries, you add in a ton of charge zealots, and your army starts to spike. And look at this, Stats already taking the gold base down here in the bottom left.
Yeah, you love that, and you know that that's going to be important as well, because you want to make sure that you can start throwing away some of these zealots. Clem is not just good in the early game, it's not just good in the mid game, but it's also incredibly terrifying in the late game in this matchup. And the only way to really start picking him apart is by giving yourself that massive economy. All the gates love double forge, by the way, because zealots that don't have any armor upgrades are relatively easy to defend. And Clem is forced to kind of slow this game down a little, because Stats has weathered the storm that perhaps wasn't quite the tornado that Clem sometimes is. But still, Clem was trying to find openings, was trying to find weaknesses. But so far, Stats has passed every single test, and we're going to get a proper macro game in our very first game on the stage of the main tournament. I love it.
Yeah, I love to see Stats perform so well in a PvT like this in just the opening game of the weekend. You can tell why now those Korean players were hyping him up to you, because this has been pretty immaculate so far. He has taken damage here and there, but nothing that he can't roll with. And now adding in the second robotics facility, getting the 2 Forge upgrades, adding in additional gateways, and this gold base here in the bottom left, Stats is looking to be in a pretty commanding spot as the game continues.
Yeah, well, if you give Clem 4 bases, 2 starports, I don't think Clem is ever too terrified. But yes, it is important that Clem stays on top of his upgrades. I believe the armory is already finished up. So I'd love to see Clem fire up those 2-2 upgrades, because you can't fall too far behind in that department. No matter how good your micro is, if you're looking at a 2-2 or even 3-3 Protoss, and Terran is still at 1-1, yeah, no great amount of micro is ever going to save you. Clem needs to be careful. Obviously, it feels like he's got an answer for the Colossus, but the only answer he has so far against Disruptors is micro, and he still has a couple of the tanks of the early game. Those might come in handy as well. This is where it will also become difficult for Stats to make sure that his army is always in the correct spot, and he's very Zealot heavy. Then I'd love to see him already counterattack a little bit, right? With 21 Zealots, don't you want to counterattack a little?
Yeah, right there with you with this first engagement now coming in. EMPs on the Stalker is pretty good. The Disruptor shot actually not able to connect with the army. Oh, that one might! Just gets defused at the last possible moment. The Zealot meat shield is gone. The Vikings are decimating the Colossi, but it seems like Stats has just enough on the ground in terms of Stalkers to mop up a lot of these critical starport units from Terran, and that's kind of the fight that Stats wanted. Yes, he did sustain a lot of damage. He lost some critical units, but he was maxed up with a ton of Zealots. You need to trade out to start pumping in the double Robo Disruptor production there as Protoss, and with Stats, I don't even believe the gold base got taken out during that moment, so the fact that he is still able to power up like this, I mean, adding in even an additional 5 gateways, catching up with +3 ground weapons, +2 ground armor, adding even gateways in the center of the map, not even needing a Warp Prism, this could become a pretty scary moment here for Clem in the mid game if Stats is able to get the ball rolling.
So many gates, by the way.
9 gateways in production. How many gateways do we have on the field right now? This is insane.
We already have 11, so we're going up to 20 gates. But Stats needs to be very careful here near the Planetary. This is not the kind of army that can fight near a Planetary, and that fight was, I feel like they both got something to be happy about. Clem completely reset the Robo count, other than that one Immortal that really, by the way, saved all these Stalkers, as a couple of the Ghost and Marauders are in a very awkward spot. Clem needs to avoid that Nova, and he will. Well, actually lose a couple of them, does drop an EMP. It's gonna come down a couple of the force fields, save that Disruptor. Absolutely fantastic force fields by Stats. Otherwise, these bio units would have gunned it down. Clem is so close to getting these extra upgrades. It wouldn't hurt Clem to slow the game down a tiny bit, but Clem always loves battling and trading.
Yeah, but look at this scary moment right now with Stats. Maxed in supply nearly, just charging in to this additional base here from Clem. And this choke point will favor Clem here defensively, but the fact that Stats is able to basically stop Clem from securing safely a 4th base, and his mineral bank is floating so high. I mean, just think of the remax potential with those 20 gateways, with a gateway in the center of the map as another attack comes in. Clem retreating away from the Disruptor shots, hasn't been able to get the engagement that he needs, and Stats is pushing forward, blinking forward even, onto the 3rd command center. This is a huge push.
Ambitious forward blink. This is really where we need to start spending that bank with the Stats. If you want to make these kinds of trades happen, you need those 20 extra Zealots to show up. But he does get away with most of the Stalkers, a couple of the Disruptors. Here are all those extra Zealots. Clem is thinking about setting up a big old drop into the bottom left side.
I don't know about that though, Roddy. This is a lot of gateway units ready to rain down hell on this 3rd base of Clem.
It's a risky goal, especially because he doesn't have the Planetary here. And if Stats is able to pick up on the fact that a lot of units are missing here on the side of Clem, yeah, Stats can absolutely get on top of that 3rd base. And not a Nova does not quite connect, but it does zone the army away. And Stats, his Stalkers, should be able to gun down that orbital. And now it's all about how much damage Clem can do with those 3 medevacs in the bottom left side. I wouldn't hate a recall here on a lot of these units.
Oh, but he's just happy to blink forward, Roddy. He's decimating this army right here in the front lines. It is solo on HP. The medevacs can't even keep up in terms of healing. And Stats is still nearly maxed. Yeah, he took some damage there at the gold base, but he's going for the killing blow right here in the moment.
And it's hard to say that that's not the right moment, because he's already killed 29 SCVs. He's getting on top of the orbital and the natural as well. Doesn't really need to go near the Planetary. I think Stats indeed has done it with the 20 gateway. Sure, Clem is still trying to be a nuisance in the bottom side of the map, but Stats can warp in 40 supply at a time, and he takes the 1-0 lead. Well, if those Koreans are hyping up Stats in PvT, clearly they're onto something, as he played an excellent game. Bit slow in the beginning, but it made sense. He got where he wanted to go. I love how quick the 4th base was. The 5th base felt even quicker. And then he said, well, yeah, robo units are great, but you know what's also great? 20 gates with an upgrade advantage. And you could really see those units shine.
Yeah, that was quite incredible there from Stats. And this is a guy that we often look at as a very defensive player in the mid and the late game. He's one of the players alongside Classic that does not shy away from throwing down 2 Stargates and going into carriers even before he takes the 4th base, right? But the fact that Stats was just able to weather the storm here in the early game and then realize that his economy was still so strong, he could just power up with 20 gateways. He could take the entire bottom side of the map and just overwhelm Clem by denying that 4th expansion. Such clutch play. And I love how Stats just is able to adapt from game to game, whether it be here in the GSL or the opening match here at DreamHack.
These Esports moves were awesome, by the way.
I thought the Disruptor 100% was going down, but just some really brilliant decision-making coming in from Klats. I mean, Stats, I was so scared in this moment when he was attacking in, blinking forward like this with these Stalkers, but he has just enough with a reinforcement, 20 gateways. You can see there on the minimap, 20 Zealots warping in basically halfway across the map, and he's just able to ride this momentum to a victory. I mean, fantastic game.
A lot of correct calls by Stats there, because that blink, you're like, that's crazy, but it's actually not that crazy, because there were barely any bio units anymore on the top right, and then he's using the Immortal, the Sentries, and the Disruptors to zone away the main bio forces on the left side. This is a really well played out game by Stats. There wasn't one moment where he won it. He just kind of got where he wanted to be, and slowly but steady got further and further ahead. And I think it's especially the upgrade advantage that really helped. That big fight in the bottom left side where it actually kind of came down to the wire, the final few Stalkers, but I think it's the one healthy Immortal that forced Clem in the end to retreat, go home packing, and that obviously allowed Stats to keep those bases up. Make sure that the gold gets saturated, and then yeah, get the gateway up in the center of the map as well. Pump out a few more Disruptors. Clem knows he's going to have to step it up a little bit. Losing here is obviously not the end of your tournament. They have 2 more lives. But if you win 2 series here in the winner stage, you go straight into the quarterfinals. And that's like the biggest deal for any of these guys. You don't have to go through the lower bracket. You don't end up in that knockout bracket eventually, which has just a ridiculous amount of great players. You think of Rogue, Solar, like the list goes on and on. A lot of strong Europeans. So just winning 2 best-of-3s is by far and away the quickest way for these guys to get into the quarterfinals.
Well, Stats spawning here as the Red Protoss in the top left, off to a great start in that regard. Let's see if he can close it out here on Ghost River in game number 2.
Always happy. Our man Stats walked up to him this morning, nothing but smiles. Said he was feeling pretty confident. He said, I'm a bit sleepy, but other than that, feeling confident. In the top right side, we're looking at the main base of the champ of Atlanta, representing Team Liquid. Down 0-1, it's Clem.
Clem once again going for the 2-gas opening here against Stats.
We can't ignore that Clem's opening obviously didn't get too much done. Now, Clem didn't bleed out a lot of units, but I do feel the double cloak Banshee, that's a pretty significant investment. And if I think about it, I would like that more against Protoss players that are a bit greedier, right? That want to go up to 3 bases of 2 gases or are known to skip out on the robo. I'm not sure how much sense it makes to go cloak Banshees against a player like Stats that likes to take 4 gases on 2 bases and kind of delay the 3rd a little.
Yeah, he was able to manage the Banshee harass quite well through the early game. Clem was able to get some multi-prong attacks in when he was levying pressure there in the very front of Stats' base, and I think he shaved away, I want to say maybe 10 probes in total over the course of that game, but I think you take that trade there as Stats. It's one of the reasons why Clem's army in the mid-game wasn't quite as potent as you would expect it to be, because that was a lot of tech lab time on a starport that wasn't double producing medevacs, that wasn't double producing Vikings, that could deal with those higher tech robotics facility units. And so that's Stats. If he's able to continue to play this solid defensive game, I am liking his odds here against Clem. And it makes me wonder exactly what adjustments Clem is going to make coming in here in game number 2 on Ghost River, because he is once again going for the delayed expansion with a double gas back on his side of the map. And the push that he went for there in game number 1 with the 1 Cyclone, 1 Widowmine, ton of Marines, and then as you said, the double cloak Banshee follow-up, it really didn't get too much done. But against a player whose defense is, I mean, arguably the best in the world for Protoss right now in this moment. I'm not sure what you really tried to do here is Terran to break his armor.
Well, it's going to be important for Clem to scout what Stats has gone for. Stats realizing Ghost River is a bit of a funky map, and a couple of these Marine Tank Liberator pushes early are very difficult to deal with. Any sort of very early aggression of Terran can be annoying to deal with here. And Stats actually goes for the Robo first. And Clem has not scouted it yet. Stats doing an excellent job in zoning that Reaper away. It's a bit surprising. There are not many Protoss players in Europe who go one gate fast expand Robo. If there was a map, it'd probably be this map, because a lot of Protosses die against Marines and tanks and Liberators early on here. But this is something that Clem would really love to scout ASAP, because then he can make all the correct calls and maybe play a bit more of a mobility game rather than I'm gonna take the straight up fight game.
Yeah, and double gas even before Twilight Council or Forge here. For Stats, I'm really interested in seeing how this build is going to develop for the Protoss player.
A quick
Might it
Robo
be a,
bait
yeah, I was thinking the same thing, maybe a really fast Robo bait, but that's not something we usually see here from Stats. Now, this drop coming in a lot faster than it was in the first game with just the Widowmine and Marine. Some nice micro there from Clem, but Stats has just enough gateway units, plus this really well-placed shield battery in the back that the Stalkers can retreat to. And once again, the push really not getting too much done there in the front for Clem.
Nope, it's very hard to find damage against the two base Protoss, especially if they open up with the Robo. They have the Observer there already. Normally it's the Widowmine that's very annoying, because Clem is incredibly good in extracting max value out of Widowmines, as this Pylon will get picked up, but Warp Gate is already done. And if you open up with a Twilight Council, you don't have any detection there. Though you try to get in range of the Widowmine burrows, on burrows, targets a unit, retargets to a different unit, and that's how Clem is able to turn nothing into a whole lot. But yeah, if Stats opens up with the Robo and he's got an Observer there, even Clem can't really get a lot of micro potential out of the Widowmine. So yeah, Stats weathers the storm, and he's going to be very happy with the Robo first tech choice that he went for.
Yeah, it is in fact going to be that really fast robotics bay into a third base. Oh, Reaper just barely not in the right position to deny the Nexus going down. So small win here for Stats, but Clem not continuing Siege Tank production. I was really thinking he might lean into the Siege Tank bush on this map, as you were mentioning. It could be very scary to defend, but Stats already in a good position.
This is going to be very difficult for Stats to deal with, though. Stats doesn't really have a very mobile army right now. Obviously, doesn't have the Colossus out yet, no extended thermal lens. We don't have Blink Stalkers, we don't have Zealous with charge. So Raven can just kind of sit there forever and drop one auto turret at a time. And yes, there is a shield battery in the main and the natural, but those batteries don't necessarily heal up every single probe. Some of these probes, they just mine a little bit too far away. So this is going to be pretty annoying. And if Clem can just keep the work accounts somewhat similar, he's got to still be alright with all of this. But you mentioned that little Reaper there. These are small things, but actually matter a lot, right? Because if the Reaper is on hold position in the middle of where that Nexus got warped in, you kill the probe, next probe has to be sent out. All of it, you buy yourself 10-15 seconds, and these things snowball like crazy into the mid game. Like the 2-base, the 3-base setup are the most important phases in StarCraft 2. What happens when you have 5-base against 5-base? Yeah, great Nova, great EMP. Sure, all of that is cool, but these 15 and 20 seconds are incredibly precious. So yeah, I think Clem will probably be kicking himself a little bit more like, oh, if I have the Reaper there and he's sending out a probe without any protection, why am I not blocking that Nexus?
A little bit of a loss there for Clem as he throws down the third command center on the low ground, and now Stats actually going into charge instead of Blink and adding in a ton of gateways. So it looks like he is really gearing up to try and stop this push at the early game, but unfortunately for him, charge will not be done by the time Clem is knocking on the door. And now this drop coming in, 8 Marines.
Love it.
Impact nearly done. Not done quite yet, but still should be able to shave off a fair number of probes. Keep in mind, there's only a couple of Stalkers here, right?
Would love to see him go for the battery first, and that is exactly what Clem is going to do, and this is where it becomes incredibly difficult for Stats to figure out how to split up his army. Stats wants to take the big fight, drops a couple force fields, he gets the Cyclone. Immortals are in range of the tanks though, so Stats is going to be fine here. Is he fine in the main base as well? Yes, he is, because he had one more Colossus come out. I mean, this could have been very scary. This should have been really difficult, and Stats, again, kind of weathers the storm without really taking a whole lot of damage. And it's really important for the Atlanta champ that he finally starts getting something to go his way, because if he does not find more damage soon, he's in trouble.
He's dropping on top of this Colossus. That's going to go down. Sim is done already. No more shield battery in the main base, so that Colossus drops immediately here. More reinforcements coming in, but no Stats! He's not guarding it. The second Colossus in the third base gets immediately taken out, and now this damage is snowballing so hard, Roddy.
Yep, another drop tried to show up in the natural. The Stats did have an answer for that one, but those 8 Marines that were in the main area, those have joined up with this double drop, and all the pilots are going to get picked off. +1 is going to get stopped. Gateways unpowered. Probes are actually being rallied way ahead of the rest of the army. Stats pulling back to defend the natural, but this is the guy that everyone is talking about. Clem finally finding that crazy momentum that he's looking for, and just like that, it's all over. Clem ties things up.
I mean, a couple of misplays there from Stats that you really cannot afford to do. You didn't have a pylon set up on the bottom left side of that main base, so the drop basically caught him off guard, and then that one Colossus by the main Nexus, you lose that. Yep. Maybe that's forgivable. Maybe you can recover from that, but then the second Colossus in the third base, walking its way up into the main unprotected. That's just the nail in the coffin right there for Stats, and it's like a stack of dominoes falling down. In the blink of an eye, Clem is able to take a game where Stats had been defending up until that point really quite well, and then just completely sweep his legs out from under him, and we are all tied up 1-1.
I don't want to say Stats had that game in the bag, but almost felt that he could already see the finish line, where he's like, hey, I survived, I'm getting ahead. And I love the idea of charge first there as well. Once you've got 3 Colossus, extended thermal lens, +1 charge, and you get a few Archons. If he drops the Templar Archive, I mean, Clem is going to have the toughest of times. Clem simply won't have the right amount of Vikings to deal with those very early Colossus out of the Robo first. Clem won't be able to have any goals to drop EMPs if the Archons get there. Stats was so close to getting there. But Clem with his double drop on top of that first Colossus, immediately at the beginning of the end. Man, Clem is incredibly lethal. He doesn't need a whole lot to go his way to win in this matchup. And that's why Clem very rarely loses against Protoss, because it's like, all right, I can win here, I can win there, I can win there. And, you know, eventually even Clem runs out of options, like we saw on Golden Aura. But he was in a bit of trouble here on Ghost River. We really can't understate that. I think Stats got himself in a great spot. And if he has one more, let's say, shield battery in the main base, and that Colossus doesn't die against the double drop, he warps in a couple Zealots, we'd be looking at a completely different game. And we'd probably be talking about how Stats is attacking Clem right now. Instead, we have loaded into game 3.
Spawning in the top right, tied up now 1-1. It's Stats, the red Protoss.
Shield of Ire. The man has been around for a very long time. In the bottom left side, the Atlanta champ tying things up after killing a couple of Colossus on Ghost River, representing Team Liquid. It's Clem.
Thinking back to that push there at the third base for Clem, it really didn't look like anything was going his way. Up until that point, Stats' defense was immaculate. The attack comes into the third base. The shield battery is well positioned. Stats able to take the fight with 2 Immortals just dominating the siege tanks on the front line. And it looks like it's going to be good for Stats, right? For the next couple of minutes, it looks like Clem has the wind just out of his sails. But the fact that he's able to take that position and then just completely exploit the fact that Stats went for the really fast Robo Bay, the charge before Blink, and come in with the attacks on multiple angles, both in the main base, behind the mineral line, the bottom left side where he snipes 2 Colossi, and then in the natural expansion by the gas. I mean, just really incredible stuff. Clem, his multitasking on point there in game number 2, looking a lot stronger than game number 1.
And also the game sense of Clem, because even if Clem maybe saw something that looked normal on the natural, Clem, the world-class Terran that he is, immediately realized, like, hey, wait a minute, you went Robo first, you didn't go Twilight. And if you go Robo first, your army is going to be a little bit more immobile, and I can actually put a little more emphasis on these drops, because if you don't have Blink Stalkers, I don't really have a whole lot to worry about. Clem is not the kind of guy to lose Medevacs against Stalkers that don't have Blink. So yeah, you have to fight, you have a tiny drop in the main, it's like, alright, he barely has an answer for those 8 Marines in the main. Will he have an answer for 2 more Medevacs to show up? As maybe Stats even got a tiny bit fortunate with the Colossus popping. I don't know when that came out, but it all kind of worked out. Like, yes, 1 Colossus can win against 8 Marines, but you throw 2 Marauders in the mix, and no, that Colossus needs backup, needs Zealots, needs a shield battery. So yeah, fun game, incredibly good series so far by Stats, as he really was close to almost getting the job done, even if he was only defending, and it may have looked like, in the end Clem won convincingly, right? It really was kind of now or never for Clem. He needed to find that damage, and he did, and then some. But yeah, close game. We're gonna take a little look as we are aiming high, brought to you by the US Air Force, with a first-person view of Stats and Clem on Alcyone.
See Stats once again throwing down the Twilight Council there in the natural expansion. So not going to be going for the super greedy robo play that we saw from him there in game number 2. I think this is a much better choice here in Alcyone, where there's a lot of different angles Terran can try and levy pressure on you both with medevacs and with forces on the ground. And I love these first-person D-mans. I wish we had something like that there in the GSL, because they're always so much fun to watch the players actually play the game from behind them. You know, it's just, I love that kind of insight. Excellent production here at ESL.
Blink is going to be the tech of choice this time around for Stats. So he's going back to what brought him some success on Golden Aura. Obviously makes sense. Golden Aura, Alcyone are maps that play out very different than Ghost River. And I love that Stats doesn't just have one opening that he believes in. Like, no, he knows that different maps kind of require some different playstyles. And it really did almost work out for him. Clem's gonna switch things up a little bit. Says, all right, no more Cloak Banshees. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to you. And he goes for an old school triple Widowmine drop. Now, Widowmines, I've heard they're very weak right now, State. They don't hurt any probes anymore. I gotta say, it's funny, because like you look at the change and like, okay, I can see why it's easier to defend, but they should still be kind of good. But more often than not, these Widowmine drops are indeed really underwhelming. Let's see if Clem can still make them shine like it's an old patch.
Yeah, medevac coming in, gonna drop one Widowmine down here, the natural expansion. Stats not able to defuse it, does finally get it there with one probe, and look at this, medevac actually sustaining a ton of damage. This is not gonna go well for Clem. He's gonna get 3 probes for a medevac and 3 Widowmines. That's a lot of starport time, factory time, basically down the drain. I do love him trying to couple it up here with his Reaper. That's a very cute move in the natural expansion, but Stats with the shield battery well prepared to defend it. And behind this, Stats also not going for the 2-gate Robo Twilight expand. He's instead adding in the 3rd gateway, a little bit more than we often see Stats do. And it makes me wonder, after he defended that so well, what his mid-game stalker count is going to be, because this is the kind of situation here as Stats where you might just want to power up a little bit more in terms of army as he's throwing down a robotics bay. You know, get the Colossus faster, add in some more Immortals, add in some more stalkers than you normally would, because there is an opportunity here for Stats to potentially get a little bit of counter damage done.
I'm actually kind of sad to see that Stats is going for the Robo Bay and the Immortal and a battery now instead of a 3rd Nexus. I don't really understand what he's so worried about. Obviously, Clem's investment is large on that triple Widowmine. The defense is 10 out of 10. He does have a couple stalkers on the other side of the map now, and he warps in that Nexus, but I really would have loved to see it the other way around. The Nexus first, the Robo Bay, then the Immortal, and then you can still build a Colossus by the time your Immortal comes out, as that is going to give you that stronger economy. I'm surprised that Stats felt he needed another battery, that he needed that Immortal before the Nexus, because a triple mine drop is actually a pretty big investment, and Stats really, I don't think, could have defended that any better than he did. It barely costed him any time. We don't even have to talk about a lot of lost mining time, because there really wasn't that much of it, right? It was like 4 probes, Widowmine fires, back to mining. You gotta capitalize on these moments, because you don't often get the luxury of very safely going up to 3 bases against Clem, knowing that nothing can happen.
It seemed like Stats just wanted to play with a little bit more map control instead, but he hasn't been able to get too much done with it. He was successful in shaving off a few Marines just outside the natural expansion here of Clem, and you know, this might still go in Stats' favor, because of course charge is going to be faster, Colossus production is going to be faster, and here in Alcyone, these siege tank pushes at the 3rd base can be really scary, Roddy, especially if your stalker count's as low as this. I mean, it is enough that you can one-shot these Marines and get kind of close, I think, to 2-shotting these Marauders if every single stalker fires. But this is still a scary push with a lot of teeth.
I mean, Stats is incredibly good in taking these fights. The Raven has a lot of energy. If you don't have Interference Matrix, it's gonna drop another turret, but there are stalkers everywhere. Raven will live. Thomas Clem, by the way, bring this Raven with the main army, because Stats literally has a battery in every single mineral line, but it will still be very useful to drop a couple other turrets near this army, because especially Zealots, once they have charge, they like to run forward, and they like to attack those other turrets. And I actually think it's smart what Clem is doing here as well, knowing that Stats' this game so far has been very good. I think it's unlikely he gets a great push into the 3rd. Why not make it very awkward for these Immortals, for these Stalkers? I don't know if Stats should really stick around here forever. He's trying to get the Immortal in range. Oh, Stats, you're playing a very dangerous game. He loses the Colossus, loses Stalkers, the Sentry. Takes a lot of damage on the Immortal. Stats, that was so unnecessary, my friend.
Yeah, that was a bit of a head-scratching moment for me. I don't understand the world where you go for that engagement on the high ground. I mean, so many critical units lost there for Stats, and Stalkers are these kind of units in PvT that if you play this kind of stat style, not a max spec style, but this kind of defensive style. You want to make a handful of Stalkers and then not really have to reproduce them, but this is an excellent catch here. Yeah. This is going to take a lot of the momentum back for Stats, being able to pick off these medevacs. Basically 20 supply of units getting killed by Clem. But look, third base, unprotected right now. Stats, he lost track of this army in the middle of the map. Shield battery overcharge is going to pop, but doesn't get to save that many probes. Reinforcements coming in. I don't think the Stalkers are going to be able to get these medevacs. There isn't that much in the main base, actually. We hear the recall popped off.
Yep, I hear the recall immediately. 2 Stalkers here to buy a little bit of time. That low HP Raven shows up. He's going to drop a couple other turrets where you could really use one of those Colossus. The Immortal is better than Bruce from the previous fight, so that's going to be an easy pickup for Clem as well. And Clem is probably going to drop immediately on top of the right side. It's going to be so difficult for Stats to keep that 4th base alive. He is trying to get his way up to Storm. The Raven flies over the middle of all 3 bases. Clem also realizing he kind of forgot about 1 tank. I mean, Stats still has a shot. He's hanging in there, but he's just not allowed to take any more damage. And obviously at this point, Clem kind of knows that, hey, I've done a great job in picking up observers. I've done a great job in reducing the amount of robo units you have on the map. There is no need for me to slow down right now. Stats needs to find a way to just force Clem to fight him straight up. Because I think in that way, Stats' army is still good enough.
Yeah, certainly right now with the army that he's assembled, but it's going to be a stereo window with Ghost Tech coming in here for Clem. And actually this push about to siege the 4th base. There's a lot of Woodamines there in the front line. These Marauders are tanking, but it's a lot of damage being dished out by these +1 Colossi. It's just a ton of scorched bodies right in front of the Woodamines. Excellent positioning there from Stats. And I think for Clem, if you want to try and breach this, you gotta maybe bring those siege tanks a little bit more forward, but already too much momentum has been lost.
Sick hold by Stats. That's exactly what Stats was looking for. Like, hey Clem, like you've done a lot of damage, you should really fight my army. But Stats, his army in a straight up fight was still good enough. And that's actually what happened there. Bought some time as well with the hold position, waiting for a battery to come online. Clem realizing that he's gonna have to play this one out in a different way. And Stats indeed has a very quick +1 air weapons on the way. I see Classic do this all the time, by the way, when he's like on 3.5 bases and he's already getting Stargates, a Fleet Beacon, and air upgrades. I'm like, Classic, you've got like 60 army supply, my friend. The Terran's almost maxed out, and he actually makes it work. And Stats copying that style right now, going for a whole bunch of cannons. I feel like it's early, but I often feel this when Classic is doing it as well, and they actually kind of get away with it more often than not. But I personally think it's a little bit too early when you don't have a second robo, when you don't have any armor upgrades. You're gonna have to defend to the absolute best of your abilities. But hey, if someone could do it, it's Shield of Fire. He's got High Templars, he's got Colossus, he's got cannons and batteries, so perhaps he can get away with this.
He's doing it a little bit better, I think, than Stats would normally do, who often would even be on 3 bases on a map like Oceanborn going into the 2 Stargate carrier before taking a 4th. Stats, instead here in the mid-game, he's been able to basically weather the storm. He took some bad engagements, but overall, he's safe. He had an excellent hold there on the 4th base. His economy is basically through the roof, almost fully saturated on the 3.5 bases that he has mining. And now he can really start to afford this, even going into 3 Stargate Fleet Beacon, and unless Clem could actually break him very soon, I think we only just have, just these 2 starports here for Clem. This could be a little bit scary if Stats is able to reach the maxed army with 2 rounds of production from these Stargates.
It's gonna take a while though.
It will.
I think Clem might wait until +2 attack and +2 armor is done. Because then you have a right amount of Vikings, you've got your maxed out, you've got a lot of bio, you can drop a couple EMPs on these High Templars, maybe drain the energy of the sentries as well. Like, sure, if nothing happens in the next 3 minutes, Stats' carriers and the mothership might all be fantastic. I personally think it's a monstrous investment, and if Clem throws down a single scan right now in the main, I think he'll immediately know what to do. I think we're just counting down the seconds until 2-2 is done. Stats' army is really not that powerful at the moment.
He's going to have to rely on static defense like these cannons, like these split High Templar, which it looks like he has about 6 maybe on the map right now, split between the 3rd base and the 4th, as he's trying to take another expansion over there at the 11 o'clock position. Does get taken out there by Clem, but Stats for now, I think he's happy just to sit on these 4 bases. A little bit slow there on the blinker trading. Got to be careful, those Templar. Do not clump them up.
I don't think he's got a choice. I don't really see how he can go up to 5. Because if he fights away from cannons and batteries, don't forget, Stats has no armor upgrades at the moment at all. It is 2-2 upgrades for Clem. If Clem drops an EMP, the Vikings get a couple volleys off. Clem is absolutely flying, but Clem does also not want to take a bad fight, walking up a ramp, clump up those units, eat a big storm to the face. So I mean, Stats is at least gonna get 3 carriers out, and that is a start. The Mothership is almost out, as one of the Ghosts even dies. Yeah, Stats might actually be thinking about sneaking in that 5th Nexus now, and he's doing it at the bottom right side. I kind of feel that Clem can still take this fight. It is important for Clem that he starts bleeding out a few either SCVs or bio units soon, because you do need more Vikings. You cannot take a fight against Colossus and carriers with 8 or 10 Vikings. Clem is going to need a little more than that.
Sometimes we even see in the GSL a lot of players throw down just a 3rd starport to really pump out the Viking numbers, because starport units, I've said it a million times over, already. They are so critical in dealing with any kind of late game Protoss army. Yeah, 3 starports up already, so I'm with you. Clem needs to find a way to start trading these units with value, because the army that Stats has assembled, he has been able to get to nearly +2 air weapons, Colossi. Now this engagement coming in. Beautiful arc here for Clem, but is it going to be enough? The Storm, very good right there on all the bio. Look at the Storms raining down on the left side. This bio right here, the choke point, the Zelnaka Tower, it's able to take down the majority of the ground army here for Stats. But the key units, the 2 Colossi, the Mothership, what is that, 6 carriers in the center now with +2 weapons?
And Clem does not have a whole bunch of missile turrets, so it's not like he really has a solid line of defense where he can buy some time. If Clem gets enough time to crank out a solid number of Vikings, yeah, he's gonna be okay. But Stats is obviously not looking to give him that time. 1 carrier is very low on HP. You probably want to send that one to the back a little bit. +2 air weapons is done. +2 carriers, a Mothership, a Colossus, and a Dream right now for Stats to cause a bit of an upset here in the very first series of the tournament, as the man who won in Atlanta comes in as one of the big favorites. But Stats is here, he's on top of Clem, his buildings, he's almost on top of the production, and the Viking numbers are simply not there. The Mothership does die, 6 Vikings, is that enough, Stats?
I mean, there's basically no interceptors left here for Stats, but the ground army is still so strong. So many Stalkers warping in, all the Liberators have dissipated. At this stage, the Colossi still levying a lot of damage there on the back line, and Clem, this has been a remarkable attempt at a hole, but I think Stats is just a little bit too strong right now, Roddy. We might have our first winner, and yep, GG is called.